Good morning, welcome to this houseboat. Today, we're going to be looking at this, the 35mm 1.8 from Viltrox. This lens is a low-cost 35mm f1.8 lens. The 1.8 aperture means it's great for low light and shallow depth of field. The body of the lens is all metal and weighs about 340 grams. The most notable thing about this lens is that the aperture ring is on the outside of the lens, along with a nice large focus ring at the front. 35mm is probably my favorite focal length. It just kind of does something aesthetically that is a mix of all the different focal lengths and give you a nice shallow depth of field while giving you a reasonably wide field of view. So for me, 35mm is my go-to. It's almost my bread and butter, and that's what I'm going to be judging this lens on in this video. Does this do 35mm things? Because spoiler alert, this probably isn't as sharp or as good as the £1,500 Sony GM lens, but this is probably the cheapest good 35mm lens that you can buy. So we're going to go from this houseboat, which I was shooting for another channel, I'll leave a link to that. We're going to go from here to Cheddar Gorge, which is a local tourist spot. I'm going to try this lens out there, and then we're going to go from there to another job where I'm going to test it in more of this kind of environment. So we're going to give it a really good test of whether this can do what I use 35mm for all the time. And this is going to be a pretty boring motorway journey, so I guess I'll just meet you there. Welcome to Cheddar Gorge. This is a pretty popular spot in Somerset, England, known for its high cliffs and various other touristy things. But from a photography standpoint, it's basically one long leading line. I use a lens like this in this environment for a kind of casual handheld shot, so I'm going to get warmed up shooting down at the road. In terms of practical shooting, I found this lens feels like a lot of the other low-cost 35s that I've shot with. Towards the top of this image, I think we're seeing some of the things I would expect from an entry-level lens, but personally, I wouldn't overthink it, as you'll see later in the video. So one thing I'm always doing with the 35 is getting foreground right up close to the lens when I've got depth. This is sort of not quite wide enough lens for this scene, but I'm going to push on with it anyway, because I think there is some stuff that I can do with it, so we'll keep pushing on. As I've already said, I use a lens like this for a particular type of aesthetic, and this lens definitely lets you play with that and enjoy this type of photography. Generally, 35mm is a great focal length in my opinion. The images you can capture probably feel more similar to what you can see with your eyes. You can get quite a wide view, but you're still able to pick out subjects. It's one place where this lens really falls flat, just like the 24mm that I use as well. When it's got direct sunlight on the glass, it has a really ugly flare from the sunlight. On the left is a shot of me shading the lens, and on the right is direct sunlight hitting the lens. It's quite significant, and this is it at its worst. The question for me is, how much of a problem is that versus what this lens is actually really good for? So we're headed down to the roadside to do a little bit of that. Okay, this shot should kind of work, but now we just gotta wait for a car. Okay, so like a dirty white van probably isn't the best option. I think maybe like a Jag or something, that would work better. For any non-car enthusiasts, that's not a Jag, but it did give me something I can use as a focal point to show the depth in this shot. So you kind of get the idea, when you've got like a fast 35 like this and you get your foreground nice and close, it creates a huge amount of depth through the scene. If you've got a leading line like that road, it just works really, really nicely. The point I'm trying to make is that that aesthetic really comes from it being a fast 35, not necessarily the sharpest and best built lens out there, but just the fact that it's a fast 35. I also got some shots of this very aggressive robin. Now, I wouldn't recommend the 35mm lens for bird photography unless you're very good at hiding and climbing trees. But at least I got some good shots that he can use for his Instagram. Okay, so now I want to test out this lens in a completely different setting. So we're going to teleport to an amazing luxury lodge in the southeast of England. This is another side of me. I photograph spaces like this all the time, and I have another YouTube channel where I tour these amazing places that you can stay. I'll leave a link below. But I usually use a 35 to move around the space casually, so that's what I'm doing here. So now we're at a job at a place called the Looking Glass Lodge, and 35mm is probably my favorite focal length, and this is well within my comfort zone. So I'm expecting to get some pretty good results with this lens. A lens like this can capture images that phones just can't right now. They're doing great with faces and portrait mode, But a complex scene like this, there is no replacement for a fast 35. So this is not a test, this is just me walking around casually getting shots just like I would with all my other lenses. As is the case with any 35mm lens, you can use that shallow depth of field to get really creative, let the viewer know what you want them to be looking at and the story that you're trying to tell. I think this lens is doing a really good job of giving me that look that I would normally be going for in this kind of space and in this kind of environment. So who's this lens for? As you saw in the video, this lens has a couple of issues I think I would expect from any entry-level lens. And if I'm honest, if those are things that you care about, I think you're probably looking to get yourself a more premium lens. I would say this is a lens for someone that's looking to experiment with that kind of shallow depth of field, that prime lens look, that photography that's so popular right now. And I think this does a great job of it. Now, Viltrox did send me this lens, so full disclosure there. I don't accept money for reviews, but I hope you'll agree that I've been pretty honest about this lens. I think the takeaway is that if I was to break my main 35 that I use daily, I would be quite happy to take this on a job. It's not perfect, but it's priced accordingly. So I'll leave a link below for this if you want to check out the full specs, and I'll also leave some links to some more premium 35s that I've had experience if anyone wants to spend a little bit more. But long story short, if you are looking for a 35 and you're on a budget, I think you'll have fun with this one, and it will probably teach you whether you want to get some more premium prime lenses or whether you want to get yourself a nice expensive zoom lens in the future. Let me know what you think in the comments, but most importantly, enjoy your photography.
Do you need a picture?